The content you are about to watch is meant for thought and consideration. Please be respectful of each other and opinions shared. This is a safe space to express thoughts, ideas, and information. The views and opinions expressed by individuals in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of every speaker of the IMEC organization or its affiliates. P.S. The Mandela Effect is real. Without further ado, I have coming to the stage next a very amazing treat. We have heard from Moneybags so far today. What an incredible speech, a talk. We have heard from Eileen today, another wonderful talk, and both of those Q&As were very, very enlightening and enriching, I thought. But coming to the stage next is a man that, after a lifelong journey of searching for deeper truths to find the meaning of life, he felt as if this journey had finally come to a dead end, and that there were no answers that could satisfy the basic yet fundamental question that he had about our existence here on Earth. This would ultimately lead him to consider his dark night of the soul in late 2016. By February 2017, he decided to start a YouTube channel to explore different worldviews and ideas held by others. You guys may have heard of the Unbiased and On the Fence YouTube channel. Not long after starting the channel, he realized the Mandela Effect was a very real phenomenon. After extensive research into the possible cause of the Mandela Effect, he felt no explanation fit, as well as the consideration that this was a supernatural event caused by some benevolent force or agency trying to awaken humanity without violating free will. This idea was confirmed when he read the book, The Three Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth by Dolores Cannon. The realization put him back onto a more spiritual path of trying to get the word out, wake up others, and bring together loving people in the endeavor to raise human consciousness to a more unified, loving Christ consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, the member of the board that we call lovingly the Heart of IMEC, a man that I have sat down and had many conversations with myself, a man that blew my mind at the last conference, and I'm proud to call a fellow board member. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Shane Robinson.
I want to welcome everyone to the 2020 International Mandela Effect Conference. I want to thank everybody who played a part in making this possible. I know a lot of work went into it by a lot of different people, and I want to thank everybody that's watching right now as well. I am Shane Robinson. I am proud to be one of the founding board members for IMEC Inc., alongside a lot of wonderful people, all of us here to help expand consciousness and change the world in a positive way. And I am really, really humbled to be a part of such a wonderful movement. And also, I am co-author of the book Mandela Effect, Friend or Foe, alongside three wonderful researchers that also have YouTube channels. And that's sort of where I got my start, is with YouTube. And in February of 2017, of course, I started Unbiased and On the Fence YouTube channel. And really the whole idea of it was to create a safe place for people to come and discuss their worldviews, their ideas about what might be going on without being judged. And it really has, it was a month later that I realized the Mandela Effect was happening. And so, of course, I went in that direction, started uncovering all of these amazing changes to our reality. I was forced to go back to the drawing board because reality was just not what I thought it was. And as a result, I, decided to, after looking into several different things that I thought it might be, as I've mentioned in the past, like CERN or D-Wave or so many different other things. You can't really do much with them. You can consider them, but then you have to put them on the shelf because they're sort of a dead end. And for a lot of people, they become like actually a good way to sort of push the Mandela Effect out of their reality. They put two things they don't understand together, like, CERN or the D-Wave, and say, oh, well, it must be causing this Mandela Effect to happen. And it's sort of like a little bit of a solution so that they don't have to really look at it. And it's sort of a human mechanism, psychological mechanism. And for most of us, we've dealt with this. This whole idea of, when you're holding two different ideas in your brain that are at odds with one another, they call it cognitive dissonance. For a lot of us, we went through this because we could see very real changes happening in a seemingly impossible way from the way we thought things worked. And so that started this long journey with this YouTube channel for me, Unbiased and on the Fence. And it has really grown. For me, the Mandela Effect has been a divine gathering of so many wonderful, loving people that have come together, and we just resonate with each other. So I want to invite anybody watching this that hasn't checked out the channel yet, please come over and check it out. It's a great community of loving people that are very open-minded, non-judgmental. So many people have come out with a lot of their stories and experiences of all types, whether it be paranormal, ghost, or alien or UFO sightings. We share images a lot. We just have this great little community where we can feel comfortable sharing what we see. There's people that capture orb photos and light ships in the sky, and it's just our little fun little group that we can hang out with. We have a 3-hour call-in show, so that gives any of the viewers an opportunity to call in and talk with me and about any kind of experiences, dreams, or anything that might be going on in their life. A lot of the people just watch. They don't even, join in with the chat. So if you want to be the type of person that just listens, because a lot of people will listen for a good year or so before someone says something and they can relate with it, and they're like, oh my gosh, that happened to me too. And then they feel comfortable enough to come out and start chatting or even call into the show. We've had a lot of people that haven't chatted before be a first-time caller. And so it's a weekly broadcast that comes on Friday nights in the United States. And it's the Friday Night Love Stream. 3 hours of just hanging out in the chat. I want to invite anybody to come and join on Friday nights. Saturday nights, Eileen Colts and I, for 2 years now, we've been doing a group intention meditation where we combine our power of intention together to try to affect reality and make positive change in the world. So we've been doing that. We've seen some wonderful results. It's very scientific. We rely heavily on the work of Lynn McTaggart, who did The Power of 8. So it's very scientific. It's wonderful information. And it's a great way for us to just hang out and discuss things. We talk about all sorts of current affairs, current topics that's going on. And so it's just a great place to hang out. Also, as a result of this whole Mandela Effect, we've become more aware of, say, the energies, the Schumann resonance, and how it affects human consciousness and how it affects different symptoms that we all might be having, like headaches and tingling and pressure in the head and different things. So on Tuesday, Michelle Wolf and I get together and we discuss some of these things that we're going through, because we believe human consciousness is going through this global shift. The whole planet is going through this shift. And the Mandela Effect, we believe, is really sort of, just part of this overall transformation that's happening on the planet. So we get together, it's called Talking Shift, and so we just talk about different things that's happening, different symptoms we're having, dreams. People chime in the chat as well on that program. So it really provides an excellent, safe place for you to come and share your symptoms or share your experiences with having these symptoms. And for a lot of people, they've found out that, a lot of people were feeling this vibrating as they were going to bed, and a lot of people are going out of their bodies. Some people perceive it as having sleep paralysis and stuff. So it just helps to come together as a group and discuss some of the different things we're experiencing so that we know that, we're not alone. And so we don't get freaked out and think, well, is this something I need to go to the doctor for? Because if you're in the chat room and, 5 other people that week have been having strong deja vu or something along these lines are wild dreams or headaches or something, then you know that, well, maybe it's the energies coming into the planet at the time. So another dear friend I've met as a result of the Mandela Effect, Overprotected Sherry. She's her and I have done some paranormal videos together, and we cover various topics about out-of-body experience, and we've interviewed different people on our paranormal show. And then we also do other upload research videos that have had really cool synchronicities and Mandela effects and things like that. So a lot of fun things on the channel to participate in. Also, as a result of this whole Mandela effect and this journey I've been on as a result of the Mandela Effect, I got into the works of Dolores Cannon, who does the QHHT. I've had the opportunity to meet Candace Craw Goldman, who worked closely with Dolores Cannon and has developed a online method called Beyond Quantum Healing. It's a methodology that can be used online and can be learned online, and I had the opportunity to learn this. So this whole Mandela Effect has really sent me down this journey of all of this really cool supernatural, I mean, the coolest type of stuff that you can ever imagine that I wouldn't have even thought was possible a few years ago. And so I can really see how a lot of what I'm experiencing now has been unlocked from hearing other people's stories that come on the channel and share their experiences. And then for some reason, once you know something's possible, it just really unlocks things to start happening for you, because you know, a lot of things you don't even consider could even happen, you know, so you won't even see it. So that's one of the things that really helps to be part of a group that can share their experiences. And then, you know, we've met in person in a few different groups and had supernatural things happen. That's wonderful. So it's been a really cool journey that a lot of us are just sort of on this journey together and have been, and you know, we share information within the group and we keep an eye on things, and it really does provide a nice little relaxing place to go to, free from the chaos, where you won't be looked at like you're crazy or anything. I know there's a lot of people that have a really tough time, especially when you start, you know, viewing all of this stuff for the first time, and you start seeing things for the first time, not only with the Mandela Effect, but with so many things that you wake up to. And I had already awakened to so many truths and stuff that by the time I got to the Mandela Effect, I felt so hopeless about everything. You know, it just seemed like there were so many lies, and it just, things got really dark. And so when the Mandela Effect came around, it wasn't that fearful for me, because I was already in this place where it was just more exciting than anything. And it sort of pulled me out of that and gave me this, it's like I woke up in a sci-fi show or something when I'm looking at all of this. So it actually, it didn't have the negative effect that it had on some people because of, I think, where I was at that time. But for a lot of people, they get pulled into this negativity, you know, worrying about things, and they begin to have a really tough time. And it's just so helpful to have a community you can go to talk to other people that are experiencing the same thing, so you know you're not going crazy, and just to be part of it. We have regulars that are all around all the time. They're, you know, they never miss a show, and then we have others that, you know, just drop in occasionally, or maybe just one out of the 3 or 4 shows that come on a week. So participation is like however you need, you know. Some people just drop in every few months or something and, you know, get dosed up on some love. We got a great group that is just loving and accepting and open-minded. So, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on promoting the channel, but I did want to provide it as an outlet for people that are having a tough time. Come on over there. It's a great group to just get your mind off of things. So tips as far as sharing the Mandela Effect, because you know, normally when you have some alarming information, you know, fear's a motivator, and you can typically, you know, if you're like, oh my gosh, the house next door is on fire, you know, most people will respond like that. But with the Mandela Effect, it's so heavy for someone who actually sees it right off the bat. It's so heavy in the brain. When you come and it's delivered in a fearful way, like, oh my gosh, the fabric of reality is being torn from this particle collider, and look, things are changing. I mean, even if they see things changing, you know, you're coming with sort of this energy that they probably just are going to naturally reject, because they don't want to have their world, you know, collapse in on them or whatever. So as far as sharing Mandela effects, I think probably the best way to go about it is to just make it fun. Make it a, hey, did you hear about this weird phenomenon that's happening, where some people remember things that never really happened. It's really cool, and you just kind of frame it as in like a more of a cool, weird sort of thing, instead of, this great deception in the world's, about to be destroyed, and this sort of end of the world scenario that nobody really knows what's happening. So just sharing the information on the basic level in a fun way can really open people up to really consider it, because a lot of times if you come at someone too hard with it, they're just going to immediately put the walls up. Some people get angry even. So it's sort of that natural reaction for a lot of people to reject things. I know it took me a year to see it, and it's so funny because, I saw the Fruit Loops and the Looney Tunes, and I thought I was affected. I thought I was a Mandela affected person. I thought because I saw that, I'm like, yeah, it's changed, but I really didn't believe it. And the reason I know I didn't believe it is because it wasn't until a year later that I saw the thinker had changed, and my mind was blown. I had that, before that, I thought I knew, but it wasn't until I had the thinker, because the thinker and the lion shall lie down with the lamb, scripture changing, both of those were things that I knew absolutely 100% how they used to be, and they were no longer that way. Now he had his hand under his chin, and now it was a wolf and a lamb. So these are things that I knew 100%, and those are the ones that woke me up. But in that 1 year period, I remember coming across like YouTubers that were talking about how, their marriage was splitting up, and, they seemed really high strung and amped up in the videos. And I was like, oh my gosh, and it was like, I just didn't get it. I'm like, how is Fruit Loops changing, destroying people's lives? And it was because I hadn't really experienced it. And so I tend to have more patience with people, because I'm not very observant, and I'm really skeptical about things, at first. So I really didn't honestly see it clearly until I really saw it. And I guess a lot of people understand that. A lot of people see it their first time, but it wasn't like that for me. I did see it, but I really didn't grasp it until a year later, when I woke up and realized, oh my gosh, this is really happening. So I think people just automatically won't even understand you coming at them like, oh my gosh, look at this happening. They'll just be like, what, big deal, some letters change. They really have to see it happening before they will really grasp what's going on. So if you present it in a fun way, then they'll be scratching their head, they'll be considering it, and hopefully go off on their own and do a little bit of research later on. In my 2019 talk, I discussed how I had moved beyond the changes that I saw happening and began to try to see what the changes were telling me. And I kind of wanted to summarize what I came up with there for those who might have missed that talk. It all started with the thinker statue, and it was showing me how the changes were revealing something about either myself or society or humanity or something. But it all started with the thinker statue, because he used to have his fist to his forehead. I was sure about that. I had one as a child when I was very young, and I used to draw it. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind. It's not a memory thing for me with the thinker statue. It's just I know how it was, just like I know my eye color or anything else. So the thinker statue changed, going from the fist to the forehead to having sort of staring at the ground, was telling me about how we'd gone from, looking with our third eye or using our mind's eye, that creative part of us, and we were just sort of using our regular sight, just sort of being more left-brained than right-brained. So it was really how the left brain was really about service to self, the ego, the self, and we do have to have the left brain, but we're out of balance, just individually and as a collective, with how we give more. Even in the school systems, we just put more into the left brain and not enough into the right brain, which is the creativity, the connection with others, and the connection with the divine and the heart-centered living. All of this is sort of the right brain, or living by the heart. So this is what the change was telling me, is that we had moved away. We were out of balance with the masculine and the feminine energy, or the left and the right brain. And then more and more changes started pointing to that for me. For instance, there was T's began to get chopped off, I noticed, and I pointed this out in my last talk. I noticed there was a painting where the American Gothic painting, where the feminine on the right used to be looking straight ahead and the masculine looking straight ahead, but now the divine feminine was looking over to the masculine side. She had shifted. And so all of these changes that I was coming across were all telling me the same thing, that we're out of balance. We need balance. We need to bring back the feminine energy, that nurturing, loving energy. This is why we've had so many wars and all of this type of out of balance, out of harmony activity that's been going on the planet, and that we needed to bring this balance back in to be able to expand our consciousness and grow as a people. First is that we love each other unconditionally and love the world unconditionally. And I think if the world can begin to think like this, that, if it's religion or race or culture or political stuff, any of this stuff is secondary to love. Love should always be primary, And we see this happen when different catalysts occur, whether it's some kind of natural disaster or something. You don't see people running up to people and asking them, what's their political view or anything before they start helping. So we can see that, all of these things fall to the side whenever there's some type of major event and people are reacting like a human should actually respond. And so really that's what we're trying to move into, and that's what this whole journey and waking up to the Mandela Effect has done for me. And so since those messages that I presented in my last talk, I've really began noticing changes that are so small, so minute, that you really can't even get a message out of them. So I've noticed things like the mix in music will seem a little bit different. I've noticed notes are being played a little bit different. One such shift is the song by Aerosmith called Come Together. It was originally a Beatles tune, and I actually had the Aerosmith's Greatest Hits album, the red and white cover, and so I had that very recording that you can go find online right now, and it's actually completely different than I remember. When I listen to it, it's like from the same era. It's almost like they originally went on a Sunday, recorded it, but now the version we have is just from the next day. It's just different. It's just slightly different. And, I've played it for a few people, and they're like, yeah, this isn't the version that I've always known. So go check that out and see if it sounds like the version. If you go check out Aerosmith's version of Come Together, see if it sounds like the same version you've always known, because that song sounds completely different. So I can't even really point at anything specific other than the whole thing sounds like it's a different recording. I've noticed breathing patterns of singers, just things that you can't normally even point out because they're just so minute. And all of this while meditating on this, because I've increased meditation and, taken time for thoughtful, just thinking about things more than ever, and really trying to be present. And this whole Mandela Effect journey has really led me to be more conscious of my thoughts and my actions, and really being in the moment. And all of that mindfulness has made me more aware of the thoughts that we hear in our mind, and learning not to associate with them. And because I've come across the work from this whole thing of, Eckhart Tolle, for instance, he's a great resource. Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham Hicks, wonderful information. So many great sources of information that has really helped me move into just being more in control of my reality, and it's really been a really beautiful thing. So with this whole, when I've been noticing these really tiny changes, and I didn't feel like there was an actual message within any of the changes, I really just took a moment and meditated on, why am I seeing this stuff? Is there a message in the fact that there isn't a message in it? And what I got was that, we've sort of been taught that our reality is solid and it's unchanging, and that the Mandela Effect is things changing in this solid world, like shifting, but they're still solid. But what these changes have been telling me is that our reality is just dynamic energy where things, it's more fluid and dynamic, and things can change at any moment, and there's really nothing solid, nothing that's permanent, and everything can be shifted. And like Cynthia Sue Larson says, how good can it get? It's much easier, I think, than we've been led to believe, because we do think our reality is solid and unchangeable, but really, in essence, that couldn't be further from the truth. And that's what I think the Mandela Effect is revealing for me recently. Probably most important about what the Mandela Effect has revealed for me, other than the fact that reality can change in an impossible way, is it really revealed a lot about myself. What I really was, I willing to let go of some of the programming that I'd had that told me that, oh my gosh, this is a horrible thing, this is a negative thing, we're being tricked. There's a whole slew of negative ideas that can flood into your mind when you begin to see reality changing in this way. And, was I going to sort of get wrapped up in that fear, or was I going to really take control of my reality and begin to view things in a much more positive light and optimistically? And was I going to take this and turn it into a positive, regardless of its original intention? And I can tell you this much. It's brought together so many wonderful people. I've met so many wonderful people as a result of this Mandela Effect. It's been truly a divine gathering of so many wonderful people with so many different gifts and experiences, and just not everybody even has experiences, but people have that deep down urge, that love that they want to share, that compassion that they have for humanity and for unity. And this whole path has shown me that a lot of the different worldviews, a lot of the different things that we come across are really all talking about the same thing, whether it's the Law of One speaking about harvest, whether it's about Dolores Cannon talking about the shift in human consciousness, or even the work of Johann Kalaman that I came across in 2017, where he was showing the Mayan calendar and how the ninth wave, this unity wave, is coming in. I believe all of this is talking about the same thing, and I believe the Mandela Effect is just a proof that this really is indeed happening. The shift is indeed happening. We're right in the middle of it. And on the cosmic scale, this is a flash in the pan, but for us, we're in these exciting times where we're actually going through the shift right now. So I want to thank each and every one of you guys for participating, and I hope to see you in the Q&A after this. In my 2019 presentation, I shared with everyone a piece of art that I had, the original Illustrator file that had all the individual layers, editable file that I could get in there and this was from 2010. It's a decade old. I was able to find this file, and when I opened it up, I looked at a hidden layer that I had used that had a world map on it, that I just used while I was creating the file as a guide, and that layer had been turned off. But when I turned it on, I saw that my artwork no longer matched the guide map that I had put underneath. Some of it lined up, some of the bigger changes people observe in the map, like South America moving, some of those things, it seems to have affected my artwork, but a lot of the smaller details like coastlines and particularly islands have definitely changed. There are hundreds more islands than what there were at the time that I was creating this piece of art. Well, what I typically do whenever I do some type of live stream is I will try to pick a section of the map to point out to the viewers as I'm going along, and everybody can agree what I'm pointing out, what's there, so that in the future, if we review the video and something has changed, then we have a number of people that have observed it. And as you see, this was actually a live stream at the beginning of this year, January 15th of 2020. And so anybody here that we see in the live chat, I'm sure not everyone was paying that close of attention, but we have people that's watched it months ago. I'm not sure when this change happened, but I want to play this section of the video here. The two new islands are these two right here. And I thought it was kind of funny because these make eyes to this sort of smile. And so it was kind of like it was smiling at me when I noticed it. But you can hear me point out all of the islands that don't have words on them. So for those that missed the other video, basically anywhere you see some land that doesn't have a word, that is new, because I put words on all of the land and I had the words lined up. So all of these islands were new at the time I did this video, but it appears that these two islands weren't even there at the time. Let's take a listen. And I'm really using this video to document. So in the future, if I say, if I'm talking about land there and it's not matching what I'm saying, then I know, because you can see there's an island here, 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 a bunch over here. What's that, 5, 6 islands there. Little piece of land that jets out here and a couple islands here. The more I can point out in this, the more later on, because it appears to be constantly changing. Indeed it does, and as you see right there, I pointed out the two at the end that I pointed out are these two here, but I did not see these. So at the time of creating that video, these two weren't there, and they have popped up subsequent to this time that I was recording this. I'm not sure when they popped up, but yeah, I just noticed a few days ago, so it's brand new for me. I'd like to end my presentation with some Mandela effects. We'll see you in the Q&A shortly.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Q&A of Shane Robinson, Unbiased and On the Fence. What an amazing talk that was. Shane, thank you for being here with us. Can we hear you better, bud?
Yes, I am so glad to be here. Thank you guys for showing up.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with yet another IMEC board member. We got 3 board members on this panel. This ought to be interesting. Cynthia, thank you for co-moderating once again with us today.
My pleasure.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and get started with some questions here. Number 1 comes from Jojo Shane. Says, anyone ever feel like they were shrinking into a teeny tiny dot when they closed their eyes, meditating, and everything else seems to grow huge?
No, I think I had an experience like that with psychedelics when I was a teenager, but nothing during meditation.
Cynthia?
I haven't had that exact experience. Like I was shrinking. Not really. Maybe when I was a child, I felt a little bit small. I just felt like in the scheme of things, I was small, but not exactly like what Jojo is describing. It's a very interesting, very specific description. And I know lots of things are possible when you're meditating. So almost anything is possible, really.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've noticed is that people can have the same experience and kind of describe it completely different. So, you know, maybe somebody listening to this can chime in the comments or the chat and say, you know what, I guess I could explain mine that way as well, you know, or something.
But you know what? I want to, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I can't say I've had that experience myself. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, there's something that came in. It wasn't phrased as a question, but I think it is a question. And this was Mike Infinity. It was just a little before Jojo, and I want to make sure we don't lose it because it was a comment really about the first time that he's heard of the bed vibrating phenomenon and was wondering. But here I'm adding the question, but it's really Mike Infinity's question. Would you like to say a little bit about that? Is there anything you could add to what is this?
Yeah, so I guess it started with some people in the, you know, our group on Tuesdays kind of talking about feeling like they had a dog that was on the bed scratching or maybe lived close to a railroad track. Of course, there's no sound or anything, but you just kind of feel this, you know, this shaking, and it can vary in frequency. So it can feel like a shaking, or it can feel like maybe your phone is vibrating in the bed. And it's a kind of a higher frequency vibration. People experience this drifting off to sleep. Or upon waking. I've gotten it upon waking, the vibrating, still your body's, I don't know if it's the, you know, whatever sort of knocks you out is still there and you're feeling it for a moment or whatever it is, but it has increased for people that's feeling this as they're going to bed. And one of the things that have been coming through from several sources is that those types of out-of-body experiences were going to increase with the way the frequencies and stuff are increasing, and not to be alarmed by it, because for some people, it can feel very scary. You can kind of come out of your body a little bit. You can hear yourself breathing, but you perceive it as if there's a monster breathing behind you or something. So there's so many different ways that people have described this. But once they come into the group and they hear other people describe it, then they can relax a little bit more about what they're experiencing. So I would suggest you come over on Tuesdays and join in with the chat and, you know, see what other people are experiencing.
Very cool. It kind of reminds me of astral travel when people look down and they see themselves and they're kind of like floating above their body. And I've had a 360-degree vision thing where I've had that. Not so much of the vibrating thing, but sometimes I'll see visual vibrations and start to be able to see through walls and stuff. That's weird. I don't know if that goes with the same thing or not, but
well, my first experience, which was in 2017, I had no idea what was going on. You know, I just woke up to the Mandela Effect. I wake up to this vibrating in my body, and I roll over to like wake my wife up to tell her something's wrong, only to find out I never really rolled over, and I was like back in my body, and I kept rolling out of my body to wake my wife up to tell her something's wrong. I didn't know. I just was vibrating so intensely, you know. And then I finally got up, you know, and I'm like, am I really up? And I'm like feeling the walls and the ceiling. I'm feeling it all. I'm crawling on the floor. I crawl into my bathroom through where the door would be. It didn't catch me, you know. And then I popped back into my body again. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I thought at the time, you know, been watching like targeted individual stuff, and I didn't know if the government was beaming me with satellites. I didn't know if I was being abducted. I mean, so many things went through my mind. So it's real helpful when you hear somebody else describe their experiences, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that, because my first experience, I thought of so many different things, and it wasn't until months later that I heard somebody describing their out-of-body experience and sleep paralysis and all of that stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what happened to me then. And and then I felt okay about it. I was actually wanting it to happen after that, and I haven't been able to get it to happen anymore. But
I was going to ask that next. Is that something that just mostly happens right when you're first experiencing this, and then it kind of settles down? Is that true for most people that you've heard?
Most people that I talk to that try to do it, unless you're talking about Albert Taylor, who's the author of Soul Traveler, is really for some people it's really easy for them. But for most of the people I talk to that try to do it, they have a little bit of success, but never quite as much as they'd like.
The reason I was laughing so much there was it reminded me of the story of a guy I read in a case file who was having sleep paralysis. And of course, you expect this to go into a UFO story. However, it does not. The guy trying to awaken himself tried so hard and jerked so hard that he literally, like you said, rolled out of his body. So when you said that, I was like, oh, wow, I've heard this instance before. That's kind of funny. Speaking of the vibrating bed, when I was younger, I would wake up and I would swear my bed was vibrating, though it had no reason to be. Washer wouldn't be going, nothing like that. All the common reasons why it would normally be were not existent. It's only happened a few times, and I blamed it on ghost activity at the time, but now, maybe not so much.
I did want to add to that, though. When that happened to me, it gave me nostalgia of when I was having nightmares at like 7 years old. So it actually, when I say it was my first time, it was my first time as an adult. And I was actually reminded of these nightmares I would have as a child when I would experience that extreme vibrating, and my parents would say, oh, you're just having a nightmare. And, I was actually going out of my body, and then I would go to their door to knock, and then I would change my mind. So I'm not even sure if I was, because I never knocked or tried to wake them up. I'm not sure if I was out of my body or really going down the hallway, but makes you wonder.
So the next question that we have here is from Eric Mill. Eric asks, has anyone noticed and or have an explanation for why certain YouTube presenters have cyclic color changes occurring while recording, i.e. Shane today?
I don't know. Eileen and I have actually talked about this. You could see where she thought it was maybe green heart energy coming out or something, from me, which, that would be cool. I don't really know, but I have noticed this as well. A few of the times, I assumed it was something with the green screen, but as you see in this last one, it was actually on me, not the background. So I don't know. I didn't notice that while when I was editing, but I couldn't go back and re-record it for the slight variations, but yes, I have noticed that, and I don't know why.
Cynthia, have you noticed this?
Can you repeat that question about a color? I wasn't quite clear.
No worries. Has anyone noticed or have any explanation for why certain YouTube presenters have cyclic color changes occurring while recording? For instance, Shane, I guess his screen went kind of greenish for a little bit while he was recording. Have you noticed this? People have, I guess it goes back to the question we were discussing earlier of people having an effect on the electronic equipment around them. In this case, being the camera, I would imagine.
Yeah, not specifically color changes. I haven't seen that, but in general, oh my goodness, yes. I've seen technical things of all nature. Just you name it, I've probably seen it. Quite a few, actually. And I don't know if you saw that Eric Mill had a question way early in the day, but it seems pertinent right now for Shane. Would it be okay if I bring that one up?
Awesome.
Go ahead, please do.
Okay. This is Eric Mill again. And the question is residue caused by one or more souls holding on to the portion of the old timeline continuing to manifest the residue? For people
that's really
you define residue. We haven't defined residue. Some people might not know.
Okay, so yeah, if for those who don't know what residue is, it's like if something was supposedly the current way that it is, then we shouldn't have any evidence that it was ever any other way that people are remembering it. So there's times when we do have things that appear to support something being the old way, which apparently, current history says was never that way. So we call that residue. So if someone were to get a tattoo of the old Ford logo before it changed, and then we went through the change, and then for some reason it stayed there. So really the question is, what's creating this residue? Why can one person get a Ford logo and it stay that way, but yet someone else comes and gets a Ford logo and it changes? And my best answer for that is that it seems like, and it kind of does support kind of how you worded it there. I think it's human consciousness. I think, if I learn to do a cover song, for instance, and I learn those lyrics before the change, and they're just in my memory, and I perform it, I feel it. I don't look them up every time I go to sing it. When I go to perform that after the change, I'm not going to get the memo on it because it's human consciousness. And I think a really good example would be the Febreze logo. If someone went into the computer and printed out a label that's going to go on the shelf, and they just sort of copied and pasted it, it's going to change. But if someone actually hand wrote it out, it's typically going to stay the old way, because it seems like entering human consciousness into the equation creates the residue. So yes, it's like we remember it. We don't get the memo that it's changed, and we continue on the original way that we remember it being, and other people remember it being. Yet for other people, they just think we're mistaken.
Yeah, I love that answer. That was
I was
great.
going to say wonderful answer. Yes. Cynthia, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I love this subject. This gets into the observer effect. So I'm all on to this one. And I know Chris would love to talk about it. He'll be on the panel tonight, and he talks about these timeline insertions from a physics point of view. I would look at the observer effect. And here we've got a situation, they talk about turtles all the way down when they talk about reality. It's kind of like, well, if Earth is sitting on a turtle, then what's the turtle sitting on? So it's also kind of like the ultimate observer gets to dictate what the reality is. And that's actually what is happening when you look at the observer effect. So as long as you can step back and observe, for example, Schrodinger's cat experiment, and you're looking at the apparatus with the cat in the box, and there's a vial of radioactive substance, which is basically controlled by a very random kind of a quantum effect. So we don't really know if the cat is alive or dead inside the box until we open it. This is a hypothetical cat. No cats are injured in the conducting of this experiment. But this gets kind of fun, because Erwin Schrödinger, he was talking to another physicist, and this guy was saying, well, what if there's a friend who's observing? And so that's where you start getting the turtles all the way down. What if there's an observer watching the person who's observing? What happens is you get an entangled system, and you can collapse the wave function as soon as the observation occurs. It tends to be tracked by the highest level observer. And so when you've got this residue, or the timeline insertions, or whatever you want to call it, you've got these like stacks of turtles, these different Earths that Dolores Cannon might be talking about. And we can choose, what are we selecting? The person that wins, if you believe in God, you'd say God wins. God is the ultimate observer. If you don't believe in God, you'd say ultimate consciousness wins, that oneness. So that's what I think is fascinating about this concept. And then looking back at the question, where did I put the question? Oh, yes. Is the reality residue caused by one or more souls holding onto a portion? Yes. I mean, there's definitely something going on there. They're entangled with it. They're kind of locking it in. They're observing it. And thanks to their focus of attention, they're keeping it going. So this brings up a good point. What do we want to keep going? And what are we preserving?
I think this would be a really great point, because this is something that a lot of people that might be new to the Mandela Effect notice, is the quantum Zeno effect. Is that?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So a lot of people will observe, like, the first thing you come across, like an anatomy change, and the first thing you think is, well, I'm going to ask my uncle doctor, right? And so you or if it's a car thing, you go to the mechanic, right? But it seems like the people that would know most don't, right? So why is that? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So what you're touching on, that quantum Zeno effect, it just means the watched pot never boils when you're staring at it. So the people who are just locking into a system, so they're a doctor, they're a mechanic, whatever their field of focus and interest is, they're going to they're staring at it so often and so frequently and with such consistency that they're really grabbing onto that possible reality and holding it in place. So for them, that is all there ever was. But fortunately or unfortunately, that's not the way reality really works. We're seeing that we've got subjective reality, which is the true nature of everything, as we've been learning from actual physics experiments in the laboratory. So it's for real.
Well, one of the things that I've thought about this whole time is that I'm kind of glad, because the last thing I want is a surgeon thinking my heart's moved, or hasn't moved, if he's doing surgery on me. So, or a mechanic changing something after it's, because there's little minor things that might have changed, like how tight you do a bolt or something that could have changed, and you kind of want them to just go with the flow and take the download, as they say. But I find it interesting that it's a little hint at the fact that time isn't quite linear like we thought, because it's like the change happens and their history gets rewritten. You know what I mean? From our point of view, but for them, it's like they've always been on that timeline. So it's a really strange thing. It shows you that all there really is now, and everything sort of branches out from that, right?
I second that. My doctor and my cab driver are the two people that I definitely want taking that download.
And the pilot, right? Especially the pilot, the ship captain.
Oh, and the pilot,
please.
Yes.
Don't notice the geography changes. They've always been that way, please.
Or where the engines on the jet happen to be. Don't stare at that. Like, well, that's wrong.
Right.
We get too many of those, we might have planes falling. We need to be careful on that one. Ain't that right, guys? Let's be careful what we generate here, chat. We're pretty powerful. Speaking of the chat, Rippin' Rabbit Hole, as always, has a question. This guy is full of questions. I guess that's what makes him a good radio host. He's always asking interesting questions. Like, Shane, how do you define our reality, and how does it differ from my reality?
You're saying the consensus reality and the individual reality?
That's, I believe, how that would be good rephrasing. Yes, sir.
I think that ties in directly with what we see with the Mandela Effect when we have dual memories. It's almost like we have our individual consciousness bubble that we're like living in with our own experiences, but then like there's this broader consciousness, this consensus consciousness, and maybe even that could be part of the even greater consciousness of the cosmic, like a portion of that, or maybe it's all within the cosmic or the Christ consciousness. So I see it as like more of a soup than timelines, like most people do. But I think the timeline thing is surely helpful. But when you see it as the soup thing, you can kind of see how there could be some overlap. You could sort of, it's just sort of a soup until you observe it and collapse things down, and they can look differently at different times. Kind of like what we were just talking about. If you're looking at them, they might not change, but you look away and you never know. Everything's dynamic.
And Cynthia, would you like to add anything to that?
Enough. What was the original question again?
well, the original question, I'll give Shane one more shot at it. Define our reality opposed to my reality.
Okay, so yeah, I answered it as best I can, I think.
Perfect. Cynthia?
This is a really good question, because the thing that we tend to ignore is, who am I? We assume that I know who I am. We assume that we know who we are. That's one of the biggest assumptions that we never investigate, and it's, I think, one of our biggest opportunities in all of science to take a closer look. And I'll be talking about this on Wednesday when I get to my talk. This is one of my favorite subjects, because who is that observer? Who am I? Who are we? And that is huge. It's much bigger than it seems. And so if I actually look at myself as a multitude, you start to understand that I might notice personal reality shifts in my own life, which I do. And if you look at the collective also as being a very strong collection of different possibilities, then you start seeing shifts and these timeline insertion kind of situations where some people notice, wow, we've got like a Nazi possibility going here. Let's get a fix on that. Let's make sure we take care of that problem, because we don't want that. That would be a negative situation or scenario. So this is a really interesting topic. And you're right, AJ, you're coming up with some great questions here. Really do appreciate it. That doesn't mean it's easy to answer. As far as what's the difference, wow, it's kind of personal, but what personal means is interesting as we go into this what Evan was talking about earlier, Moneybags, about this spiritual journey and going into a state of higher consciousness. Because as we make those steps up, and what I'll riff off of what Eileen was talking about with frequencies, then we're getting into a state of higher consciousness for ourselves. But then myself becomes a collective, and it looks like I'm working in cahoots with Jerry, which I think I am. I mean, when we first started this, this is a great opportunity. 3 of us are here. We know how weird this was and wonderful that first conference came together the way it did. It was extraordinary. And I know people hear that and they think, well, I've heard that before, but you had to be part of this to see it. And from my standpoint, it was like amazing. I've worked in business. I've hired people. I've had teams of people working together. I've never seen anything that worked together quite like this. And what I would attribute it to is that instead of me, myself, this little tiny ego of I want what's comfortable for me, I just recognize I want what's good for this event, for this conference. So did Dark Wolf. So did Shane. So did the Quantum Businessman. So did Lauren. So did Kimberly. And together, it's like, wow, this is just happening. It was extraordinary. And
I couldn't have dreamed a better dream. I mean, the lack of ego in this group, I've said it 1,000 times and I'll say it 1,000 more. This has been the most amazing group to work with because we all work in love and passion for the community. It has come together in such a divine way. And we've already seen synchronicities here today. Like the questions I randomly read off to Eileen happened to be the ones she happened to randomly had written down. That was not planned for anybody who was wondering. There was no planning there whatsoever. When she said, that's all my questions, I went, really? No way. But yes, absolutely amazing the way this has come together, as you were saying.
But this ties in with AJ's question, because my sister has sometimes pointed out to me, like she'll say, Cindy, you're working with some kind of strategy here. I don't know what it is. And it's so funny to me because it's like, this is no strategy. I'm just going in service to highest good. That's always what I do. And then bizarre things happen, like what I thought I was doing gets canceled and something better is happening. And I'm right there at the right time, always, always. And it looks insane. I mean, it just looks like, how did I even do that? Well, it wasn't really totally the small me. So this is a question that AJ asked. He asked this question. And to me, it really gets into this reality selection and this very cooperative process. And I know you want to say something, Shane. I can see it.
Well, I was just going to say it was more than obvious that there was a higher agency at work, whatever you want to call it, that was aligning things, making things just work out so perfectly. And then, as soon as a problem seemed to come up, a solution was always there in a really cool synchronistic way over and over again. Little adapters. I mean, just like so many little things that, could have caused problems, but, it's like everything just worked out so well. And then just the feeling of everyone being together was, just icing on the cake, really.
We had a series of miracles too. Jerry, do you want to talk about the podium?
Oh, the podium. That was absolutely amazing. To 1 second, Wasted Millennium, we have grabbed this question. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you asking before you double posted it. Thank you very much. That was very respectful. I have got the question and I do appreciate it. That said, the podium, when 2019, when we did the conference in Ketchum, Idaho, I had went and got the conference room and I looked at it and I, okayed it. And I asked the people at the time, hey, I don't see a podium here. Do we have a podium to speak from? They said, no, I'm sorry. We don't have one. We're not going to plan on getting one. We don't have it. Fine. Fair enough. So I continue to look all around town to try to find this podium. And I couldn't find anyone who would lend them, rent them, just couldn't do it. It was out of my reach. And I was really stressing, but every single time I closed my eyes and seen myself doing my talk or the talks that I would give, the intros, things that I would give as MC, I would see myself standing in front of this podium with like the faux wood top. And I know you guys remember in school those old faux wood top podiums, or laminate top is what it is actually. And I just kept seeing it. I'd tell myself, no, that we don't have that. And then I would go back to dreaming about what I'd be doing, or daydreaming, if you will, as Cynthia puts it. And I would see this podium, and I had to keep telling myself, we don't have that. That doesn't exist. But every time I would think about it, that's what I would see. So fast forward, we get to the day before the conference where myself and a couple people go into the Quantum Businessman and them had showed up. We all went into the conference room that we had rented, and I just walk right in and hang my arm on something and start looking around and talking. And I thought about the podium, and about this time I looked down and went, oh my goodness, I just walked in and laid my arm on the podium, didn't even think twice about it, looking around, looked down and realized we've got a podium. So I looked up and I asked the people who were with the hotel still standing there, I said, wow, where did this come from? They said, oh, we just got that in. We figured we'd go ahead and put it together for you guys. Are you kidding me? And it was the older, it's brand new, but it's the older style faux wooden top podium. I couldn't believe it. The exact one I'd seen every time I had thought about giving these different talks and intros and whatnot at the conference at the time. I straight up manifested it. Absolutely. As Medium that Rocks just said, you manifested it. Yes, I did. I manifested it straight up. I have no idea. There was no energy that I was mentally putting into it, but there was an energy that I was putting into it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Love that.
We can all manifest. If you think you cannot manifest, guys, look at me. Look at where we're at today and right now. We can all manifest amazing things into our lives. And sometimes we can manifest things that touch every other person's life involved. I think it's absolutely amazing. But another thing that's amazing is this incredible chat and these questions that keep coming in. My goodness. So I was just asked about a question here, and I did grab it. So I want to make sure that we actually do get to this question. Shane, does anything exist if it is not observed? As in, anything outside the room you're in, or a banana in a bin? Or is there simply a, quote, code, end quote, for whatever item or place till observed? Thoughts?
See, I've actually struggled with this to wonder if I'm the player or if everyone's the player and there's a consensus. So yeah, I do believe that it has to be observed to be there. Like it's just a wave of potential. Whether or not that stops with my observation, or it's an individual thing for each person, or it's a collective thing, like, as long as there's some human observing it, it's there. I don't really know how all that works, but yeah, it appears that at least science, quantum science appears to suggest that until you look or observe it, it's not really there. It's just kind of a wave of potential. Or
Cynthia?
I'll let Cynthia clarify that. That's sort of my layman's way of explaining it.
Well, that's a traditional way to explain it, but you know me, I'm such a mystic, so I tend to see things, and sometimes I'll actually notice possible realities. I can feel their presence. I can actually feel what might be coming, often like a day ahead, maybe 2 days ahead. Sometimes, it gives me that uncanny sort of guided by the future perspective.
Right.
Maybe that's why it looks like I have so much strategy. It's not so much strategy. It's more like just working with like my future self, or the fullness that is us. But sometimes I can sense the bifurcations. I can feel like, well, this is coming and it might go this way. It might go that way. This way feels like trouble. This one feels like it's going to be better. So let's try to steer that way. That's a different take on it. I don't know who asked this question because I didn't hear the name, Jerry.
I'm glad you asked that, because somebody in the chat also asked that. They thought it was a wonderful question. It was Wasted Millennium. Thank you, Wasted Millennium.
Excellent. Yeah, so going back, the second part of that question was, or is there a code? That's interesting. That would tend to refer to the simulation kind of a theory, what John Archibald Wheeler, the physicist, would call it from bit. And it's looking at the fact that everything can be defined as information. My own take on it is that might be true, but there's a feeling level to it. That John wouldn't go there probably, but that's what I notice. I notice, okay, there may be a code, but there's a feeling to it. And maybe because we humans are sensitive to things like that, Schumann resonance that Eileen was saying is so necessary for us. Even if we go in space, we have to have that resonance frequency of the earth with us. I think similarly, we can sense when there's a vibration of possible reality that seems more resonant, more harmonious. It's onward and upward, or it's kind of downward into some down the drain spiral. And if you get the down the drain spiral, don't go there. Go onward and upward. Go, how good can it get? So that's what I'd add to that. Yeah.
Perfect.
I would say Einstein, one of my heroes, hated this thought. I mean, he despised it. He would say, I cannot believe that when I turn around, the moon disappears. And I have to say, I am in agreement with Einstein on this one. And in my theory, conscious theory of everything, which I presented, yes, not mine, but a conscious theory of everything that others and myself have presented, is that the underlying base of everything is consciousness. And that's what collapses the wave functions down to the human level. And then it's from there that we collapse wave functions further. So I can't say that it doesn't exist because it's in the trash bin over here. I think the universe takes care of that wave function just fine while I'm taking care of collapsing other functions. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And we can put Einstein at peace a little bit here so he's not rolling over in his grave. Because thankfully, there's some entanglement going on here. And if you acknowledge that every single insect, every animal, every plant, every tree is capable of being conscious at some level, then you can turn away. You don't have to look at the moon because they got it covered. You know, you're part of this collective consciousness. So some people call that panpsychism, but you can also call it entanglement, and that this is really what's happening. And it ties in with all these great questions that are coming in today about these levels of collective consciousness holding possible realities together, bubble realities, what we might call personal or collective realities.
Man, these questions, I tell you what, we have got some brilliant people watching this. I tell you, these questions are out of this world. I love it. The medium that rock has a question. If the Mandela Effect could be humankind at its infancy during a major leap in consciousness, what are the probabilities you see for our evolution as we mature?
I see it as, I know that we all hope for these huge leaps, and I think they do come that way sometimes, but I see it as this constant evolution, constant expansion. It's constantly expanding. Even the perceived setbacks, if viewed from a broader perspective, are still working towards something. So I don't really know what perspective she's wanting it answered from, but there's different ways to kind of attack that. I don't know what I'll let Cynthia take it.
This is why it's
my seat's getting hot over here. I'm just playing.
It does, doesn't it? It warms up quick over there, man. I tell you.
You know what's
that
funny?
That is not a comfortable seat.
I rented a car, and my daughters, I got out of the car to put gas in it or something. We're on a vacation, and it had a seat warmer. They turned it on. I got on. I'm like, the seat is hot, and then they just start laughing. I'm like, oh, okay. Pranksters. Okay, yeah. So I love the question, and absolutely, the Mandela Effect can be the beginning of things. Where is it going? Well, again, my favorite question: how good can it get? So. Yeah. Ask yourself that and think about what really matters. So it's not so much jetpacks and flying through the air. That's cool. But I think what's more important is that humanity gets along, that we respect one another, that kindness prevails, that there's a lot of empathy and reverence in daily life. I would love to see that. When you get reverence in daily life, you get miracles in daily life. So personally, that's the direction I would like to see. But for each of us, we might have our own vision of what that is. What's fun is that collectively we are creating it, and we are working together. Just like this organization and the conference came together, we're doing a lot more than we realize, and we're doing it right now. This conference is actually shaping reality. I have no question about that.
I second that. How good can it get? Well stated, Cynthia. I want superpowers. I want a world full of superheroes. I think that'd just freaking be awesome. I don't care which superpowers. We can go random set. Everybody gets one. I don't care. But I think that would be great. That's the world I want to mature into. And I only say that half jokingly. Shane, would you like to have an out-of-body experience? If so, what would you like to experience as propagate this light?
Mm. I always say I want to go to Giza. I want to see what's under the pyramid, see if I can visit the halls of Amenti, see if they're really there. So that would probably be my first destination, if I could remember.
Under the pyramid. I like that. Most people would say in under the pyramid.
And under, and under, definitely.
Cynthia, I'm going to go ahead and throw the question to you while we're here. If you could have an out-of-body experience, assuming that you haven't had one already, which I don't know if you have or not, I'd be willing to put money on you have. But if you have not, what or where would you like to experience?
I'd like to see humanity's best possible future in about 500 years. I've already seen one that's not. I'd love to see the good one. That's where I'd go, because I'd like to know, where are we headed far enough in the future that we can kind of say, like, that's amazing, and give ourselves a lot more hope about, like, this is doable and we're going to make it.
That's not fair. I should have let Cynthia answer first, because I wasn't thinking I was outside of time. I was only thinking outside of space. So.
Oh, do another one. Do another one.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. I probably wouldn't go that far. I'd want to see probably 15 or 20 years in the future. Nice. Something that I'll see in my lifetime, but I don't know. Maybe I don't want to, I think, how good can it get, though? I'm expecting a good future, though. I was only joking.
I was Cynthia. I want to see how far we get, just how far we make it. If you could live forever, right? Or if you could time travel, I would go right there for sure. Alva Yoder has a question. She says, if the ME has been around for a very long time, what was it called before ME?
Quantum jumps.
Quantum jump.
Right.
Reality shifts wasn't
shifts,
yes.
PMH Atwater, correct?
That's correct. She was
Reality
the first
shifts,
one to really give this a name, and it was in her book Future Memory, which ties in exactly with what we're talking about. So it's quite appropriate. Yes, I believe she was the first to really pin it down. That was in the early 90s. So.
Was there anything before that might have been referring to this phenomenon?
Well, in a shamanic perspective, if you start allowing things in where you're talking about shamans and not everyday people, sure. But I think for everyday people, PMH was the first to say, this is really going on widespread, a lot more than people realize. And yeah.
I was going to ask if Philip K. Dick had a name for what he, I know he kind of explained it, but did he come up with like a word for it?
He did. I'll be talking about this a little bit on Wednesday, a little preview teaser.
Oh, okay,
here.
A little teaser then. All right, awesome.
Yeah, he talks about orthogonal time. I'll be talking about time. So time is fascinating. It's very tied in with what we're doing.
Okay, so he sort of tied it more with time than...
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense, right. That's
he did.
Awesome.
And he was aware that...
Losing your head there, Jerry.
That's the background. He's in the Northern Lights.
That's awesome.
Well, you know us wolves, we got to bed down momentarily every now and again. Another question we have here for Mr. Shane. No, Cynthia Sue Larson has a question. Collapsing the wave, how do we do that?
Okay, this is typically when you look at a quantum physics experiment, then the idea of collapsing the wave function is going from a state of where something is in a wave function smeared over all possible probabilities state into something that's physically material that you can measure. So going from like a wave function for a photon into an actual photon particle that can make like a splat on that double slit experiment screen at the back. So we do that by choosing the way that we make our observations. So simply by choosing how you pay attention, you can absolutely collapse a wave function. So it's basically by paying attention, by choosing what you care to look at and really focusing your attention right there.
So I had a quick question with that's come up with the double slit experiment. So isn't it technically when they only kind of observe it from a distance, they don't look too closely, then it's performing like an interference pattern? It's when they look really close that it performs like a particle, or at what point? Because they have to be able to see it somehow, right? To know that it's behaving like a wave when they're not looking. So
Well, what they do is if they want to know if they want to know which slit the photon's going through, they'll put the particle detector, inside one of the slits, so they'll know for sure. Like it's going to detect a particle going past, and it's like a motion detector kind of a thing. So when the photon flies right through, it has to act like a particle because it's like it knows that particle detector is inside the slit. Right. If it's not, then it knows, oh, I'm loose. I can just do whatever I want. And so one photon at a time acts like it's interfering with itself and creates part of a diffraction pattern on the screen. And after you fired a whole bunch of them through, it looks like ripples, right, interfering with each other on a pond, right, which is crazy. And this happens outside of time. You can have delayed choice experiments that John Archibald Wheeler originally thought of. Turns out they work. You can affect the past from the future or the present.
Yeah, I've seen those studies, and that's amazing how they come up with these ways to do that,
Yes.
It's really neat.
And Dr. Larry Dossey talks about this when he studies prayer, and he's done a great job at describing that prayer really works, and you can even pray for people in the past. It's not too late because you can have that delayed choice effect later on. And they've done some amazing studies that he documents. He writes great books.
Is that the studies where they did a bunch on people that already passed away and saw improvements on the ones that they did that on? Like a history of them? Was that a different study?
Well, he's written several books, and some of the because he's a medical doctor, he has a great deal of interest in healing, and because he's witnessed so many miraculous healings in his career, he was especially intrigued with some of these huge studies that are taking sort of after the fact, all the data and then just seeing what's going on. So some of that people could influence the results afterward, and sometimes all of the collected data would indicate absolutely there was some sort of a movement through time happening, which is quite interesting. Yeah,
that's wild.
Okay, I got one for you. Speaking of moving through time, here's an interesting take. Kevin Warner asked, feelings on the idea we are just a holographic replay of the past.
Holographic replay of the past.
Like a ancestor simulation.
I don't know. See, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I guess you could look at it that way, but I think from our perspective, it's not like that, but maybe from another perspective, it might appear to be more like that, sort of orchestrated, like we're playing out a grand play of sorts. But I think that's probably a pretty far removed view perspective than what we're dealing with. So it's kind of a moot point,
And Cynthia?
Well, my take on it is it's that pile of hands again. You know that game where whoever puts their hand on top, they win? And it's kind of like if the simulation is happening, who's doing the simulating and what is being simulated? So if you're playing some kind of game and you think that's what's happening, or you think there's them and they and that sort of thing, then sure, you could have that viewpoint. That's not my viewpoint. So I would take more of the actively perceiving viewpoint and say that to me, my life doesn't feel like a simulation. It feels like what I think starts happening, and that feels realer than real. Whereas before people wake up to the Mandela effect, I think that's much more the sleepwalker feeling. That would be what people call what are they? Non-NPVs? What is that?
Non-player characters.
Non-player, yeah.
NPC. Okay. Yeah. I don't use that term myself, but
yeah, I don't either.
Background people is what I think Dolores Cannon called them. But yeah, there's a bunch of different terms, but
right.
Same thing. I mean, it's a sleepwalker basically. It's like you just haven't quite awakened yet,
Yeah, I call it sleepwalker and reality shifts. But that if you're looking at a simulation, then the people that are simulated, you would think those would be the ones simulated. And the ones who are waking up and noticing this is weird, they should be the ones realizing, hey, we're waking up to the fact we can play with these toys and life is malleable. We can move reality.
Right.
So that's the take that's my approach. So when I think, is there a holographic replay going on? Although I do sometimes see a cycle of repeating events, it's kind of like, fascinating situation when that happens. To me, it's still all of us playing with reality. It's not me caught up in some loop and I'm stuck in it and I have no free will. I believe that we really do have free will. That's what I'm noticing. So it doesn't feel like some holographic replay with someone else pushing the buttons and lifting the strings on puppets. I don't feel like a puppet.
Right.
That's just my take on it.
But, for the people who do, that's kind of their experience. You know what I mean? I mean, if you really feel like you're experiencing it, I like to use the example of Pac-Man. If we're in this game that we're here to sort of learn and grow and experience different things, and or some people typically like to think of it as a school, or a movie. Any of these things, can be helpful. If you're Pac-Man and you're saying, I'm running around in this maze, he would be right. You know what I mean? If he says, I'm being chased by these little ghost demon things, he would be right. But there's another perspective where you can say, you're fine, to just start the round over again. You'll, just try to get the things and try to stay away from the ghost. And, they're just programmed to do what they're doing. They're not so much angry and hunting you down. So there's a huge difference. And I think it can be helpful to have that view of it where it's playing out. I think maybe simulator might even be better than simulation, because it's, like in an airplane, you get in there and it's, you remove the danger of death and all of that, but you feel like you're in it, you're experiencing it, you're doing all of the stuff, but at the end of the day, there really isn't any death. I mean, your consciousness lives on. This is just the vehicle you're in while you're playing this game or playing this out, this learning experience.
I like that. That's good.
So I think simulator might be a better way than a simulation, because that kind of sounds like it's just a projection or something. I don't know. Something that just...
Perfect. All right, guys, we have to cut it here. I do apologize. We've got the panel about to come up in just a couple of minutes. So we're going to go ahead and cut this Q&A here. Again, so many amazing questions. I cannot believe this. Shane, how's that seat over there? A little bit on the warm side.
I'm going to turn on the air for a second, probably, before the...
I tell you what, man, that seat right there becomes the most uncomfortable one ever.
I enjoy it, though. I've got Cynthia. I feel comfortable with Cynthia to fall back on, so it's not really fair. This is a cheat code in the game, having Cynthia here.
Right? How good can it get, right?
How good can it get? Thank you, Cynthia. You're my lifeline on, what's that show?
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the heart of IMEC, Shane Robinson. Amazing, my friend. Absolutely amazing. Round of applause. One's in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. If you've had an amazing time so far today, I know that I have. And from the looks on my panelist faces here, they have also had a blast. So, Shane, once again, thank you for an amazing talk, an amazing Q&A. It's been an absolute honor to have you here with us today and to be a part of this organization with you. Us three, we always have a blast when we get together, and the time goes so quickly. I could not believe it's already over. So, guys, stick around. Couple more minutes. We will be coming back for the big panel. We've got a lot of questions to go. We hope to get to all of them tonight. Your questions, if they are not answered or asked, they will still be entered into the contest that is still going on, ladies and gentlemen. And we've got some amazing selections tonight. You guys have made it really, really hard on us to choose the winners here, which is exactly what we like. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll have our panel discussion. This is International Mandela Effect Conference 2020, Day 2. And thank you, guys, and we'll see you momentarily.